The sun blazed mercilessly over Rawhide, Nevada, as Rebecca Rose stepped off the stagecoach on a sweltering June afternoon in 1878, her legs trembling so badly she nearly collapsed onto the dusty street. Everything she owned fit into a single carpet bag clutched against her chest, and her stomach churned with equal parts hunger and terror as she realized there would be no turning back from the decision she had made 3 months prior, when she answered that advertisement in the Philadelphia newspaper. A woman in her late 40s approached with a tight smile that did not quite reach her eyes. "You must be Miss Rose. I am Mrs. Hutchins. Mr. Garrett has asked me to escort you to the boarding house so you can freshen up before the ceremony this evening." Rebecca nodded mutely, her throat too dry for speech. The reality of what she was about to do hit her with the force of a locomotive. In less than 4 hours, she would marry a man whose face she had never seen, whose voice she had never heard, whose true nature remained a complete mystery despite the 3 carefully worded letters he had sent. All she knew was that Cornelius Garrett owned a cattle ranch outside town, was 32 years of age, and required a wife to help manage his household and bear him children. The boarding house room was small but clean, with a pitcher of water and a worn but serviceable mirror. Rebecca stared at her reflection, barely recognizing the pale, frightened woman looking back. She was 23 years old, auburn-haired and green-eyed, unremarkable in every way except for the desperate circumstances that had driven her across the continent. Her father had died 2 years earlier, leaving debts that consumed everything. Her mother had passed when Rebecca was only 7. She had worked as a seamstress in Philadelphia, but the wages were barely enough for bread and a shared room in a tenement. When her employer made advances she could not accept, she had fled, and the mail-order bride advertisement had seemed like the only answer to her prayers. She changed into her best dress, a simple blue cotton affair she had altered herself to be more fashionable, and pinned her hair up with shaking fingers. The face in the mirror looked slightly better now, though the fear in her eyes remained unmistakable. Mrs. Hutchins returned precisely at 5 o'clock. "The church is just down the street. Mr. Garrett is already there, along with Reverend Phillips." The walk to the small wooden church felt both endless and far too brief. Rebecca's heart hammered against her ribs, and she found it increasingly difficult to draw breath. Her hands had gone ice-cold despite the heat, and her vision seemed to narrow to a tunnel as they approached the building. Inside, the church was dim and mercifully cooler. As her eyes adjusted, Rebecca saw a tall figure standing near the altar beside an elderly minister. The man turned, and she got her first glimpse of Cornelius Garrett. He was indeed tall, well over 6 feet, with a powerful build that spoke of years of hard labor. His face was weathered and stern, dominated by a thick dark beard and eyes that assessed her with an expression she could not quite read. He wore what were clearly his best clothes, though they were rough compared to what men wore back east. Everything about him seemed hard, unyielding, foreign to everything she had known. "Miss Rose," he said, his voice a deep rumble. "You look presentable enough. Shall we proceed?" The words, delivered without warmth or welcome, struck her like a slap. She opened her mouth but found herself unable to speak, unable to move. This was real. This was happening. In moments, she would be bound for life to this stranger who looked at her as he might examine a horse he was considering purchasing. "Come along then," Cornelius said with a trace of impatience. "The Reverend has other obligations this evening." Rebecca forced her feet to move forward, each step requiring monumental effort. She took her place beside Cornelius at the altar, and Reverend Phillips opened his Bible. The words of the ceremony seemed to come from very far away, muffled as though she were underwater. She could feel herself beginning to shake, tremors starting in her hands and spreading through her entire body. When the Reverend asked if she took Cornelius Garrett to be her lawfully wedded husband, she opened her mouth but no sound emerged. The trembling worsened, her whole frame vibrating with terror and overwhelming panic. Black spots danced at the edges of her vision. She was going to faint. She was going to collapse right here at the altar. Suddenly, she felt a hand on her elbow, steadying her. Cornelius had moved closer, and when she dared glance up at him, something in his expression had shifted. The hardness had softened, if only slightly, and when he spoke, his voice was low enough that only she could hear. "I will wait for you," he said quietly. "Take all the time you need." The unexpected kindness in those words pierced through her panic. She drew a shuddering breath, then another. Cornelius did not rush her, did not show any sign of irritation. His hand remained on her elbow, a steady presence, and gradually the trembling began to subside. "I am sorry," she whispered. "Nothing to apologize for," he replied, still in that low, gentle tone so different from his earlier brusqueness. "This is frightening, I expect, for both of us." The admission that he too might be nervous steadied her further. She looked at him again and saw past the stern exterior to something else, something that might possibly be vulnerability, or at least understanding. She turned back to Reverend Phillips and managed to speak, her voice barely above a whisper but clear enough. "I do." The rest of the ceremony passed in a blur. When Cornelius kissed her, it was brief and chaste, his lips barely brushing hers. Then Mrs. Hutchins was congratulating them, and the Reverend was shaking Cornelius's hand, and it was done. She was married. She was Mrs. Cornelius Garrett. A wagon waited outside the church, and Cornelius helped her up onto the seat before climbing up beside her. They rode in silence through the dusty streets of Rawhide and out into the open country beyond. The landscape was harsh and beautiful, so different from Philadelphia's crowded streets. Mountains rose in the distance, purple against the darkening sky, and the air smelled of sage and dust. After nearly half an hour, Cornelius spoke. "I apologize for my manner earlier. I am not accustomed to such situations, and I handled it poorly." "You were kind when it mattered," Rebecca said softly. "That is what I will remember." He glanced at her, and she thought she detected the faintest hint of a smile beneath his beard. "The ranch is just ahead. It is not much, but it is mine. Ours now." The ranch house came into view as the last light faded from the sky. It was a simple structure, single-story and built of wood that had weathered to gray, but it looked solid and well-maintained. A barn stood nearby, along with several corrals containing horses and cattle. Cornelius helped her down from the wagon and retrieved her carpet bag. "I will show you around tomorrow in the daylight. For now, you must be exhausted." Inside, the house was sparse but clean. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a large stone fireplace dominating one wall. Cornelius lit several lamps and warm light filled the space. "There are 2 bedrooms," he said, gesturing to doors on either side of the main room. "The larger one was mine. I have moved my things to the smaller one. You should take the main bedroom." Rebecca stared at him in surprise. "That is very considerate, but I could not ask you to give up your room." "You did not ask. I am offering." He set her bag down by the door to the main bedroom. "You said you would wait for me at the altar. Well, I will wait for you too, as long as you need." This marriage was a business arrangement in many ways, but that does not mean we cannot come to it as we are ready, rather than as strangers forced together. Tears pricked at Rebecca's eyes. She had expected very different treatment, had steeled herself for demands and expectations she was not prepared to meet. This unexpected gentleness undid her in ways fear never could. "Thank you," she whispered. "Are you hungry? I am afraid I am not much of a cook, but I can manage simple fare." "I am starving, actually." Cornelius proved to be understating his abilities. He prepared bacon and beans and fresh bread he said he had purchased from a neighbor, and the simple meal was one of the best Rebecca had ever tasted, perhaps because she had eaten almost nothing on the long journey west. As they ate, Cornelius told her about the ranch. He had 120 acres and about 50 head of cattle, along with a dozen horses. He employed 2 ranch hands who lived in the bunkhouse behind the barn. It was a modest operation, but it provided a decent living, and he had ambitions to expand. "What about you?" he asked. "Your letters told me little about your life before." Rebecca told him about her father's death, the debts, her work as a seamstress. She did not mention her employer's advances, not yet, but she spoke of the poverty and the fear and the lack of options. "I understand," Cornelius said when she finished. "I came west for similar reasons. My father was a farmer in Ohio, but the farm failed. I had nothing there, no prospects. So I came here with almost nothing and built this through years of hard work. I know what it is to be desperate." "Why did you want a wife?" The question emerged before Rebecca could consider whether it was too bold. Cornelius was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "I am tired of being alone. This ranch, it is my life's work, but what is the point of building something if there is no one to share it with? I want a family. I want a home that feels like more than just a place to sleep between work days. But there are few women out here, and those who are available had no interest in a rough cattleman like me." He gave a self-deprecating shrug. The mail-order arrangement seemed practical. "That is remarkably honest," Rebecca said. "I see no point in pretense between us. We are married now, for better or worse. We might as well be honest." After dinner, Cornelius showed her to the main bedroom. It was simply furnished with a large bed, a dresser, and a washstand, but everything was clean and well made. A window looked out over the dark landscape. "Sleep as long as you need tomorrow," Cornelius said from the doorway. "I will be up early to tend the animals, but there is no reason for you to rise until you are rested. We can discuss your role here when you are ready. Good night, Cornelius." "Good night, Rebecca." She closed the door and leaned against it, her mind spinning. This man, this stranger she had married, was nothing like she had feared. He was rough around the edges, certainly, and stern in appearance, but there was a kindness in him, a decency she had not dared hope for. Rebecca slept fitfully that first night, waking often to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch and the knowledge that her entire life had changed in the span of a few hours. But when morning light streamed through the window, she felt something she had not experienced in years: hope. True to his word, Cornelius had already left when she emerged from the bedroom. Coffee was warming on the stove, and she poured herself a cup, savoring the bitter warmth. Through the window, she could see him working with one of the horses in the corral, his movements confident and sure. She explored the house more thoroughly in daylight. The kitchen was adequately supplied, and she found stores of flour, cornmeal, dried beans, and other staples. The house needed a woman's touch, certainly. It was clean but stark, lacking any decoration or comfort beyond pure function. When Cornelius came in for the midday meal, Rebecca had prepared a simple stew from supplies she found. His face showed genuine surprise and pleasure. "This is excellent," he said after the first bite. "Much better than my usual fare. I am glad I can contribute something. I want to be useful here. You are my wife, not a hired hand, but if you want to take on the household management, I would be grateful. I have been managing alone for so long, but it would be a relief to share the burden." Over the following days, they established a rhythm. Cornelius worked the ranch from dawn until dusk, while Rebecca took over the cooking, cleaning, and household management. She proved to have a talent for organization, and soon the house began to transform from a bachelor's rough shelter into a real home. The ranch hands, two weathered cowboys named Tom and Billy, were initially wary of her presence but warmed when she ensured they received good meals and treated them with respect. She learned that Cornelius was a fair employer, demanding but decent, and both men were loyal to him. In the evenings, after supper, Cornelius and Rebecca would sit together and talk. These conversations became the cornerstone of their developing relationship. Cornelius spoke of his dreams for the ranch, his love for this harsh land, his carefully guarded hopes for the future. Rebecca told him more about her past, including eventually the truth about why she had left her seamstress position so abruptly. When she confessed what her employer had attempted, Cornelius's face darkened with anger. "I am glad you left. A man who would take advantage of a woman in such a position is beneath contempt. I had nowhere else to go. That is why I answered your advertisement. Then I am grateful for your desperation, even as I regret the circumstances that caused it." He met her eyes steadily. "You are safe here, Rebecca. I give you my word." As weeks passed, Rebecca found herself increasingly drawn to her husband. Cornelius was not demonstrative or romantic in any conventional sense, but he showed his care in 100 small ways. He brought her wildflowers he found while checking fence lines. He built her shelves for the kitchen when she mentioned needing more storage. He listened when she spoke, truly listened, and valued her opinions. For his part, Cornelius seemed equally affected. Rebecca caught him watching her sometimes with an expression of wonder, as though he could not quite believe she was real. He became more talkative, more open, the stern facade dropping away to reveal a man who was thoughtful and surprisingly gentle despite his rough exterior. One evening in late July, they sat on the porch as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The heat of the day was finally breaking, and a cool breeze brought the scent of sage. "Rebecca," Cornelius said quietly, "I want you to know that I have come to care for you deeply. This marriage began as an arrangement, but it has become something more for me. Much more." Her heart leaped. "For me as well. I did not expect to feel this way, but I do. I have been thinking," he continued, his voice uncertain in a way she had never heard before. "We have been married nearly 2 months now, and I feel as though we have built something real between us. But I do not want to presume. I said I would wait, and I meant it." Rebecca reached for his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "I do not want you to wait any more." He turned to her, his eyes searching her face. "Are you certain?" "I am certain. I want to be your wife in truth, Cornelius, in every way." He raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "I care for you, Rebecca. I think I might even love you, though I am not certain I know what love feels like." "I think I love you too," she said, and knew it was true. This man who had shown her such unexpected kindness, who had waited patiently for her to feel safe and ready, who had given her a home and hope and a future. How could she not love him? That night, when she invited him into her bedroom, he came to her with tenderness and care, patient and gentle. Afterward, as they lay together in the darkness, Rebecca felt a contentment she had never known. This was where she belonged. With this man on this land, building this life together. Their relationship deepened as summer faded into fall. They were partners now in every sense, working together to manage the ranch and prepare for winter. Rebecca proved to have a good head for numbers, and she took over the ranch accounts, finding ways to economize that impressed Cornelius. "You have a gift for this," he told her as she showed him her careful ledgers. "We are actually ahead this year, thanks to your management." "We are a good team," she replied. "The best," he agreed, pulling her close for a kiss. In October, Rebecca began to suspect she might be pregnant. She waited another month to be certain before telling Cornelius. She chose a quiet evening after supper when they were alone by the fire. "I have something to tell you," she began, her heart racing. He looked up from the harness he was mending, his expression attentive. "What is it?" "I believe I am with child." For a moment, Cornelius simply stared. Then his face broke into the widest smile she had ever seen from him. He set aside the harness and pulled her into his arms, lifting her off her feet. "Truly?" "You are certain as I can be. I would say the baby will come in June." "A baby," he breathed, wonder in his voice. "Our baby. Rebecca, you have made me the happiest man alive." The joy in his voice brought tears to her eyes. She had not known what to expect from his reaction, but this pure, uncomplicated happiness was more than she had dared hope for. Winter came to Nevada with cold winds and occasional snow. Rebecca's condition became obvious, and the neighboring ranch wives, who had been cautiously friendly before, now welcomed her warmly into their circle. She learned that being pregnant created a sisterhood among women, regardless of other differences. Mrs. Sarah Templeton, whose ranch bordered theirs to the east, became a particular friend. She was a few years older than Rebecca, with 3 children of her own, and she provided invaluable advice and reassurance. "The first one is always frightening," Sarah told her over coffee one afternoon. "But women have been doing this since the beginning of time. Your body knows what to do." "I hope you are right. I confess I am terrified." "That is completely natural, but you have Cornelius and he clearly adores you, and you have friends here now who will help when your time comes." Rebecca squeezed Sarah's hand gratefully. She had not realized how much she had missed female friendship until she found it again. Cornelius was impossibly attentive during her pregnancy. He worried constantly, insisting she rest more, refusing to let her lift anything heavy. It was endearing, if occasionally exasperating. "I am not made of glass," she protested when he tried to prevent her from carrying a basket of laundry. "You are carrying the most precious cargo in the world," he replied firmly. "Indulge me." Despite the harsh winter and her advancing pregnancy, Rebecca had never been happier. The house felt like a true home now. She had sewn curtains and cushions, adding color and comfort to the spare rooms. Cornelius had built furniture, including a beautiful cradle for the baby that demonstrated surprising craftsmanship. On a February evening, as they sat together reading by the fire, Cornelius looked up from his book. "Do you ever regret it, coming here?" "Not for a single moment." "Do you regret bringing me?" "It is the best decision I ever made." He set his book aside and knelt beside her chair, placing his hand gently on her swollen belly. "You and this baby, you are my whole world now." She ran her fingers through his hair, marveling at how much had changed since that terrified woman had stood trembling at the altar. "I love you, Cornelius, so very much." "I love you too, Rebecca, more than I have words to express." Spring arrived, bringing new life to the ranch. Calves were born, colts ran in the pastures, and Rebecca's time drew near. She had grown enormous, her back ached constantly, and sleep was nearly impossible, but she had never felt more alive. When her labor began on a warm June morning, Cornelius immediately sent Billy racing to fetch Sarah Templeton and the midwife from town. He stayed by Rebecca's side, holding her hand and offering what comfort he could, though his face was pale with worry. "This is natural," she told him between contractions, trying to reassure him even through her own pain. "Women do this every day. Not my woman, not the mother of my child." His voice was tight with fear. "I cannot lose you, Rebecca. You will not lose me, I promise." Sarah arrived with the midwife, a competent woman named Mrs. Chen who had delivered half the babies in the county. She examined Rebecca and declared that everything was progressing normally. "First babies take their time," Mrs. Chen said calmly. "Could be hours yet. Best you get comfortable, Mrs. Garrett." The labor was long and difficult. Night fell and still the baby had not come. Rebecca was exhausted, soaked with sweat, and beginning to despair. Between contractions, she could hear Cornelius pacing in the next room, his boots heavy on the wooden floor. "He is terrified," Sarah said gently, wiping Rebecca's face with a cool cloth. "Men always are. They would rather face a stampede than watch their wives in labor." "I wish I could spare him this," Rebecca gasped. "He would not want to be anywhere else, and you know it." Finally, as dawn broke on a new day, Mrs. Chen announced that it was time to push. Rebecca drew on reserves of strength she did not know she possessed, and with Sarah coaching and encouraging her, she pushed with everything she had. The cry of a newborn filled the room, and Mrs. Chen's face broke into a smile. "It is a boy, a healthy, strong boy." Rebecca collapsed back against the pillows, tears streaming down her face as Mrs. Chen placed the baby on her chest. He was red-faced and squalling, perfect in every way. The door burst open and Cornelius rushed in, his face wild with relief and joy. "Rebecca, are you all right?" "I am fine. We are fine. Come meet your son." He approached almost reverently, his eyes fixed on the tiny bundle in Rebecca's arms. When he reached out and the baby grasped his finger with a surprisingly strong grip, Cornelius made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "Our son," he whispered. "He is beautiful. You are amazing. I cannot believe you did this." "We did this," Rebecca corrected, smiling through her exhaustion. "Together." They named him Charles Andrew Garrett, and he proved to be a healthy, vigorous baby with a powerful set of lungs. Cornelius was a devoted father from the first moment, taking his turn walking the floor with Charles during night wakings, and showing surprising competence with diapers and bottles when Rebecca needed to rest. "I never knew I could feel like this," he told Rebecca one evening as he held his sleeping son. "Like my heart might burst from how much I love him. Love both of you." "We are blessed," Rebecca agreed. As Charles grew from infant to baby to toddler, the ranch prospered. Rebecca's careful management combined with Cornelius's hard work resulted in steady expansion. They were able to purchase additional cattle and hire another ranch hand. Charles was 2 years old when Rebecca discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy seemed easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect. Their daughter, Rose Marie, arrived on a crisp October morning after a much shorter labor. "A girl," Cornelius breathed, cradling his daughter with infinite gentleness. "She looks just like you, Rebecca." "She has your chin," Rebecca observed fondly, "and I suspect she will have your stubbornness." Life settled into a rhythm of work and family. Charles was a bright, energetic boy who loved following his father around the ranch. Rose was quieter but equally determined, and she showed early signs of inheriting Rebecca's organizational skills, lining up her dolls in careful rows. When Charles was 5 and Rose was 3, Rebecca found herself pregnant once more. This pregnancy was the most difficult, leaving her exhausted and unwell for months. Cornelius worried constantly, and she felt guilty for causing him such concern. "Please do not apologize for giving me another child," he told her firmly when she tried to express her regret. "You are the strongest person I know, and you will get through this." Their second son, James, arrived early but healthy in March. He was smaller than Charles had been but equally vigorous, and Rebecca recovered quickly this time. "3 children," Cornelius said wonderingly, watching Charles and Rose peer into the cradle at their new brother. 10 years ago I was alone in this house, never imagining I could have such riches. We have been very fortunate," Rebecca agreed. The years passed swiftly, marked by the changing seasons and the children's growth. Charles grew tall and strong, already showing promise as a rancher. Rose was clever and capable, learning to read early and devouring every book they could obtain. James was the charmer of the family, sunny-natured and affectionate. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Cornelius surprised Rebecca with a trip to Virginia City, arranging for Sarah Templeton to watch the children for a few days. It was the first time they had been alone together since Charles was born, and it felt like a second honeymoon. "You remember how terrified you were at our wedding?" Cornelius asked as they strolled through Virginia City streets. "I remember thinking I was making the biggest mistake of my life," Rebecca admitted. "I could not have been more wrong. I knew the moment I saw you trembling there that I could not rush you, that you needed time and gentleness." He took her hand. "I am glad I waited. I am glad you whispered those words. They changed everything." They stayed in a hotel, a luxury after years of ranch life. That evening, over a fine dinner that neither of them had to cook, they talked about their life, their children, their dreams for the future. "I want to expand the ranch," Cornelius said. "Not just for us, but for the children. Build something that will last, that they can inherit and build upon themselves. The accounts are healthy enough that we could consider purchasing the Morrison property," Rebecca suggested. The neighboring ranch had recently come up for sale. "It would double our acreage. You have been thinking about this," Cornelius observed with a smile. "I am always thinking about the ranch. It is my home, our home. I want to see it succeed as much as you do." They purchased the Morrison property the following month, a significant investment but one that proved worthwhile. The expanded ranch required more hands, and Cornelius proved adept at finding and training good men. Rebecca took on more community roles as the children grew older. She helped establish a small school in Rawhide, ensuring her children and the children of neighboring ranches received proper education. She organized church socials and helped newcomers settle into the area, remembering her own frightening arrival and wanting to ease that transition for others. Sarah Templeton remained her closest friend, and their families were deeply intertwined. Sarah's eldest daughter and Charles developed a sweet courtship when they were teenagers, though both sets of parents agreed they were too young yet for anything serious. "They remind me of us," Sarah said to Rebecca one afternoon as they watched the young people at a community picnic. "Though I hope they have an easier start than you did." "I would not change our start," Rebecca said honestly. "It made us appreciate what we have." On their 15th anniversary, Cornelius took Rebecca riding out to a spot overlooking their combined properties. From this vantage point, they could see the full extent of what they had built together. Thousands of acres of grazing land, hundreds of cattle, the ranch house that had expanded over the years to accommodate their growing family. "When I stood at that altar 15 years ago and saw you trembling with fear, I was terrified myself," Cornelius admitted. "I thought I had made a terrible mistake, bringing a refined Eastern woman to this harsh place. I thought you would hate it here, hate me." "I think I fell in love with you the moment you said you would wait for me," Rebecca replied. "That kindness, that patience, it showed me who you truly were beneath that stern exterior. I fell in love watching you transform that empty house into a home, watching you face every challenge this life threw at you with courage and grace." He pulled her close. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Rebecca Garrett, and you are the answer to prayers I did not even know to pray," she replied, kissing him. As the sun set over their land, painting everything in shades of gold and amber, Rebecca reflected on the journey that had brought her here. That terrified girl on the stagecoach, clutching her single bag and facing an unknown future, could never have imagined this happiness. The man whose gruff advertisement she had answered had proven to be everything she had never dared hope for. Partner, lover, friend, father to their children. Their life was not without challenges. Droughts came and harsh winters. Cattle died and markets fluctuated. They lost friends and neighbors to accidents and illness. But through it all, they faced everything together, their bond growing stronger with each passing year. Charles, at 18, was now a full partner in the ranch operations, showing his father's work ethic and his mother's head for business. Rose, at 16, had begun teaching at the school Rebecca had helped establish, and showed every sign of becoming as fine a woman as her mother. James, at 13, was still finding his way, but his cheerful nature and way with animals suggested he would find his place. On a spring evening when Rebecca was 41 and Cornelius was 50, they sat on the porch together watching the sunset, as they had done thousands of times before. 3 children were grown or growing, the ranch was prosperous, and they had built a life beyond anything either had imagined possible. "You ever think about that day?" Rebecca asked. "Our wedding day. I think about it often. How close we came to it all going wrong. If I had been less patient, if you had been less brave. But you were patient, and I found my courage." She squeezed his hand. "We found our way to each other. The best journey I ever made," Cornelius said softly. As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Rebecca thought about the young woman who had stepped off that stagecoach so many years ago, desperate and afraid. She thought about the stern-faced rancher who had shown unexpected gentleness. She thought about all the moments, large and small, that had built their life together. The mail-order bride who had trembled at the altar had found not just a husband, but a true partner, a great love, and a home that transcended any place or building. The cowboy who had whispered he would wait had given her the time and space to fall in love at her own pace, and in doing so had won her heart completely. Their story was not one of love at first sight or grand romantic gestures. It was better than that. It was a story of patience and kindness, of 2 people choosing each other day after day, building something real and lasting from the uncertain foundation of a business arrangement. As the years continued to pass, that foundation only grew stronger. They celebrated Charles's marriage to Sarah Templeton's daughter Emily in a beautiful ceremony that brought tears to Rebecca's eyes. They welcomed their first grandchild, a boy named Cornelius after his grandfather, and Rebecca watched her husband hold the baby with the same wonder he had shown holding their own children. Rose married a teacher from Virginia City, a kind young man who valued her intelligence and supported her desire to continue teaching. They settled in town but visited the ranch often, and Rebecca delighted in watching her daughter build her own partnership based on mutual respect and love. James surprised them all by developing a passion for horses. He began breeding and training horses on a portion of the ranch, and his stock became known throughout Nevada for quality and temperament. He was in no hurry to marry, declaring he had plenty of time for that later. When Rebecca was 48, Sarah Templeton passed away suddenly, and Rebecca mourned the loss of her dear friend deeply. But the community they had built together sustained her, all those women who had become friends over the years, bound together by the shared challenges of frontier life. Cornelius, now 57, had developed a touch of arthritis but remained active on the ranch, though he relied more heavily on Charles and the hired hands. He and Rebecca took evening walks when weather permitted, moving more slowly now but still together, still talking, still finding new things to discover about each other after all these years. On their 25th anniversary, their children surprised them with a party. Friends and neighbors came from miles around, filling the ranch house and spilling out into the yard. There was music and dancing and feasting, and toast after toast celebrating the couple who had built such a legacy. "To Mama and Papa," Charles said, raising his glass, "who showed us all what true partnership looks like. To a marriage built on patience and kindness," Rose added. "To love that keeps getting stronger," James finished. Cornelius stood, pulling Rebecca up beside him. "When I placed that advertisement seeking a wife, I hoped for a helpmate and the mother of my children. What I received was so much more. Rebecca, you have been my partner, my best friend, my great love. These 25 years have been the best of my life." Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. "And when I answered that advertisement, I was running from a life of poverty and fear. I found safety, yes, but I also found purpose and belonging. I found a home in this land and in you, Cornelius. I found a family and a community. I found myself. You gave me all of that by simply offering to wait until I was ready." The celebration continued late into the night, with children and grandchildren, friends and neighbors, all joining in the joy. But eventually, as midnight approached, Cornelius and Rebecca slipped away to their bedroom, leaving the others to continue the festivities. 25 years, Rebecca marveled, sitting on the bed they had shared for so long. "It seems both forever and no time at all." "I would live them all again," Cornelius said, sitting beside her. "Every moment, every challenge, every joy, all of it with you." "I was so afraid that day," Rebecca remembered, "standing at the altar looking at this stranger I was about to marry. I thought I was making the biggest mistake of my life. And now I know it was the best decision I ever made, coming here, marrying you, building this life, all of it." He kissed her, gently and sweetly, as he had done thousands of times before. But it still made her heart flutter, still filled her with warmth and certainty. In the years that followed, they settled into the comfortable rhythm of a long marriage. Cornelius officially turned over the ranch operations to Charles when he was 60, though he still spent his days working on smaller projects and advising when asked. Rebecca reduced her community activities somewhat but remained active in the church and school. They had 5 grandchildren now, with a 6th on the way, and Rebecca loved being a grandmother. She spoiled the children shamelessly, baking cookies and telling stories and slipping them treats their parents would never allow. Cornelius carved wooden toys for them and taught them to ride, patient and gentle with the little ones as he had been with his own children. On quiet evenings, they would sit together on the porch, watching the sun set over land they knew as well as their own hearts. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they sat in comfortable silence, but they were always together, their hands clasped, their shoulders touching. "You remember what you said to me that day?" Rebecca asked one evening when she was 55 and he was 64. "When I was trembling at the altar." "I will wait for you," Cornelius replied immediately. "I will never forget those words. They changed everything." "They did," Rebecca agreed. "They told me that you would be patient, that you would let our marriage grow at its own pace, and you kept that promise. You waited until I was ready, until we were ready. You gave us the gift of time. It was the easiest promise I ever kept," he said, "because I could see that you were worth waiting for, worth everything." As Rebecca approached her 60th birthday, she sometimes felt the weight of the years. Her hair was more gray than auburn now, her hands showed the wear of decades of work, and her body moved more slowly than it once had. But when she looked in the mirror, she saw not just the passage of time but the evidence of a life well lived. Every line on her face told a story of laughter or worry or joy. Cornelius, now 69, had slowed considerably. His arthritis troubled him more, and he tired easily. But his mind was sharp, and his love for Rebecca had not dimmed one bit. He still looked at her as though she were the most beautiful woman in the world, and his face still lit up when she entered a room. They celebrated their 30th anniversary quietly, just the two of them and their children and grandchildren. There was no large party this time, but the gathering was warm and full of love. 30 years, Cornelius said, holding Rebecca's hand. The best 30 years of my life. We have been very blessed, Rebecca replied. Charles stood to offer a toast. My parents taught me what marriage should be. Not just romance, though there has been plenty of that, but partnership, respect, patience, building something together that is bigger than either person alone. That is what I see when I look at them, and that is what I try to create with Emily. Rose nodded. Mama always told me that the best marriages are built slowly, with care and attention. She said she and Papa did not fall in love at first sight, but rather grew into love day by day. I think that is more romantic than any fairy tale. James, now 28 and finally courting a young woman from Virginia City, added, I waited to find someone because I wanted what you two have. I wanted a love that would last, that would weather storms and grow stronger over time. I think I have found that now, and it is thanks to your example. As the family celebrated around them, Cornelius leaned close to Rebecca and whispered, Do you remember being afraid? All those years ago. I remember, she said softly. But I do not feel afraid anymore. I have not felt afraid in a very long time. You made me feel safe, Cornelius. From that moment at the altar when you told me you would wait, you made me feel safe. You made me whole, he replied. I did not even realize how incomplete I was until you arrived and filled all those empty spaces I had been ignoring. That night, as they prepared for bed in the room they had shared for 3 decades, Rebecca found herself reflecting on the incredible journey of their marriage. From strangers united by a business arrangement to partners deeply in love, they had built something remarkable. I love you, she told Cornelius as they settled into bed. I love you more than I ever thought it was possible to love another person. And I love you, he replied, pulling her close, forever and always. The years continued their gentle march. Charles took over more and more of the ranch operations as Cornelius aged. Rose had 3 children of her own now and was still teaching, inspiring a new generation of students. James married his sweetheart, Lucy, in a beautiful ceremony and continued to build his horse breeding operation. When Rebecca was 63 and Cornelius 72, they decided to take a trip back east. Neither had been beyond Nevada in decades, and they wanted to see how the country had changed. They traveled by train, a luxury that would have been unimaginable when Rebecca had first made the journey west. In Philadelphia, Rebecca stood on the street where she had once lived in poverty and fear. The city had changed, grown larger and more modern, but she recognized the corner where the dress shop had stood, though it was now something else entirely. I was so desperate when I lived here, she told Cornelius. So hopeless. I could not imagine a future that held anything but more of the same grinding poverty. And now, he asked, now I have a life I could not have dreamed of then. A husband who loves me, children and grandchildren, a home, a purpose. You gave me all of that, Cornelius. We gave it to each other, he corrected gently. They returned to Nevada after 3 weeks, and Rebecca kissed the ground when they arrived back at the ranch. I am glad we went, she told Cornelius, but I am more glad to be home. This is where we belong, he agreed. As Cornelius aged into his mid-70s, his health began to fail more noticeably. He spent more time resting, less time working. Rebecca cared for him with the same devotion he had always shown her, and their roles reversed in a natural evolution of their partnership. On a warm summer evening when Rebecca was 66 and Cornelius was 75, they sat together on the porch as the sun set. Cornelius had been quiet all day, reflective, and Rebecca sensed he had something on his mind. "I have been thinking," he said finally, "about the day we married. About how you trembled so badly I thought you might faint." "I nearly did," Rebecca admitted. "I almost let you. I almost let the ceremony proceed, let you say your vows out of obligation rather than choice. But something made me stop. Some instinct told me that if I wanted a real marriage, a true partnership, I had to give you the freedom to choose it." "And you did," Rebecca said softly. "You told me you would wait, and you meant it. I have thought about that moment countless times over the years. It was perhaps the most important decision I ever made, to wait, to be patient, to let you come to me in your own time." He took her hand, his grip weaker now than it once had been, but still warm and familiar. "It gave us everything, Rebecca. That moment of patience gave us this whole beautiful life." Tears streamed down Rebecca's face. "You gave me the gift of time. Time to know you, to trust you, to fall in love with you. Time to become myself, to find my strength. Everything good in my life flows from that moment when you whispered those words." They sat in silence as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple. Rebecca memorized the moment, the feel of his hand in hers, the warmth of his presence beside her, the vast landscape they had shared for so long. The following spring, Cornelius fell ill with a fever that would not break. Despite Rebecca's devoted nursing and the doctor's best efforts, it became clear that he was failing. The children gathered, bringing the grandchildren, and the house filled with family as they had one last chance to say goodbye. Cornelius remained lucid until near the end. He spoke with each of his children, blessing them and telling them how proud he was. He held his grandchildren and told them stories, but most of his time he spent with Rebecca, their hands clasped, their heads close together. "I am not afraid," he told her. "I have lived a full life, a happy life, more than I ever dreamed possible." "I am afraid," Rebecca admitted, her voice breaking. "I do not know how to be without you. You are the strongest person I have ever known. You will go on, surrounded by our children and grandchildren. You will continue to live and love and build as you always have." He squeezed her hand weakly. "I am only sorry I cannot stay longer. There is so much more I wanted to see, to share with you." "We have had 43 years," Rebecca whispered through her tears. 43 beautiful years. That is more than many people get. You remember what I said to you at the altar. "I will wait for you," Rebecca quoted softly. "I meant it then, and I mean it now. I will wait for you, Rebecca. On the other side, whenever you come, I will be waiting." He died peacefully the next morning, with Rebecca holding his hand and his children gathered around. He simply stopped breathing, his face peaceful, and Rebecca knew he was gone even before the doctor confirmed it. The funeral was well attended, with neighbors and friends coming from across the county to pay their respects to Cornelius Garrett, a good man who had lived a good life. Rebecca stood beside the grave, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, and tried to find strength to face a future without her partner. In the weeks and months that followed, Rebecca struggled with grief unlike anything she had known. She and Cornelius had been together for so long, had been so intertwined, that his absence left a void nothing could fill. But slowly, with the support of her children and the passage of time, she found a way forward. Charles and Emily moved into the main house to care for her. Though Rebecca protested, she did not need caring for. She kept herself busy with her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, for Rose and James both had growing families now. She remained active in the community, teaching young brides the skills they would need to manage frontier households. One afternoon, a young woman came to see her. She was newly arrived from the East, about to marry a local rancher through a mail-order arrangement, and she was terrified. "I do not know if I can go through with it," the girl confessed, reminding Rebecca so much of her younger self it made her heart ache. "I do not know him. What if he is cruel? What if I hate it here?" Rebecca took the girl's hands in her own. "I came here much as you did, 43 years ago. I was so afraid at my wedding that I trembled and could not speak. I thought I was making the worst mistake of my life." "What happened?" the girl asked. "My husband-to-be whispered that he would wait for me, that I could take all the time I needed, and in that moment I knew it would be all right. He showed me kindness when I needed it most, and that kindness grew into the greatest love I have ever known." Rebecca smiled through tears. "We had 43 beautiful years together. We built a life, a family, a legacy, all because he was patient and because I was brave enough to try." "Do you think my man will be like that?" the girl asked hopefully. "I do not know," Rebecca said honestly. "But I know that you have the strength within you to face whatever comes, and if you find that he is a good man, give him a chance. Give yourself a chance. Sometimes the best things in life are the ones we least expect." The girl thanked her and left, and Rebecca returned to her memories. She spent her remaining years surrounded by family, the matriarch of a large and loving clan. She told stories of Cornelius to her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, keeping his memory alive. On her 75th birthday, her family threw her a large party. Looking around at all the faces, all the people who existed because she had been brave enough to answer that advertisement so many years ago, Rebecca felt overwhelming gratitude. "Mama," Charles said during the celebration, "you and Papa built something remarkable. Not just this ranch, but this family. You showed us all what love looks like, what commitment means." "Your father built it as much as I did," Rebecca said. "More, perhaps. He was the one who knew to be patient, to wait, to let love grow in its own time." That night, alone in her room, Rebecca held the photograph of Cornelius that sat on her bedside table. He had been 73 in the photo, his face lined and weathered but his eyes still bright with intelligence and love. "I miss you," she whispered to the image. "Every day I miss you. But I am grateful for every moment we had. You gave me such a beautiful life, Cornelius." Rebecca lived to be 78 years old, remaining sharp and engaged until the very end. When she fell ill in the winter of 1931, she knew it was her time. Her children gathered, just as they had for their father, and she was able to say her goodbyes. On her last night, as she drifted in and out of consciousness, she dreamed of a church in Rawhide, Nevada. She was young again, standing at the altar, trembling with fear. And beside her stood a tall, stern-faced cowboy who leaned close and whispered, "I will wait for you." In her dream, she turned to him and smiled. "You do not have to wait any longer. I am ready." Rebecca Rose Garrett passed peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by the family she and Cornelius had created. At her funeral, the church was packed with children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and friends whose lives she had touched over more than 50 years in Nevada. They buried her beside Cornelius, and the headstone read, "Rebecca Rose Garrett, beloved wife, mother, grandmother. She was brave enough to take a chance on love." The ranch continued to thrive under Charles's management and would eventually pass to his children and their children. The legacy that began with a trembling bride and a patient cowboy grew and flourished, touching generations. And somewhere, perhaps, two souls reunited. The mail-order bride who had found her courage and the cowboy who had known to wait, together again after years apart. Their love story, which began with whispered words at an altar, had proved to be eternal after all. In the family Bible that was passed down through the generations, someone had written in careful script, "On June 15, 1878, Cornelius Garrett married Rebecca Rose." He promised he would wait for her, and he kept that promise every day of their 43 years together. May we all be blessed to find such patient love. And in Rawhide, Nevada, in the small church where they had married so long ago, young couples still took their vows. Some knew the story of the trembling bride and the patient cowboy, while others did not. But the legacy of that moment, when kindness and patience transformed fear into love, lived on in the very air of the place where two strangers had become the truest of partners. The land they had worked together still bore cattle. The house they had built together still sheltered their descendants. The love they had grown together, carefully and patiently, still inspired all who heard their story. From a business arrangement born of mutual desperation, Cornelius and Rebecca had created something beautiful and lasting. They had proven that love need not arrive in a lightning bolt, that sometimes the deepest connections are built slowly, with patience and care and daily choice. Their story was not one of fairy tale romance or passionate drama. It was better than that. It was the story of two ordinary people who chose each other, day after day, year after year, building an extraordinary life from the foundation of a few whispered words at an altar. I will wait for you. Those 5 words had changed everything. They had promised patience, respect, and the freedom to choose love rather than have it forced. They had led to 43 years of partnership, 3 children, 9 grandchildren, and countless great-grandchildren. They had created a legacy that would endure for generations. And in the end, that trembling bride and that patient cowboy had found exactly what they had both been seeking, though neither had known it when they met. A true partner, a deep love, and a home not just in a place but in each other's hearts. Their love story became legend in their family, told and retold to new generations. It reminded everyone that the best things in life often come when we are patient, when we are kind, when we give others the space and time to come to us freely, rather than demanding immediate surrender. Rebecca and Cornelius Garrett's story proved that real love is built, not found, that it grows from small acts of kindness and daily choices, that it requires patience and courage and the willingness to take risks even when afraid. And it all began with a trembling bride at an altar and a cowboy wise enough to whisper, "I will wait for you."